Good evening. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Katie Del May, and I am a senior curator here at the Frist Art Museum. And I've had the true pleasure of working on our presentation of Alexander McQueen and Ann Ray Rendezvous. But first, before we begin, as is our custom, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. The Frist Art Museum sits on land the Cherokee and Shawnee Native peoples, elders, and their ancestors call their homeland. We acknowledge and pay respect to them and offer deep gratitude and respect to the land and water that support us. This is truly an extraordinary exhibition. It's one that not only traces the arc of one of fashion's most important stars through 60 stunning garments, it also offers a rare insight into Alexander McQueen's technical process, his astonishing creativity, and perhaps most importantly, insight into his full humanity, his personhood rather than his public persona, through 65 powerful photographs selected by the artist herself, McQueen's close friend, Ann Ray. As you will hear more about soon, Ann and McQueen began working together in 1997, and she was his only in-house photographer, shooting 43 collections over the course of the next 13 years. We are thrilled to have Ann Ray with us here tonight from Paris, and Kelly Peck, Vice President of Barrett Barrera Projects from St. Louis, in conversation with Frist Art Museum Executive Director and CEO, Seth Feman, about this exhibition, which of course is on view beginning today and running through August 25th. It's going to be an exciting summer. Organized by Barrett Barrera Projects in St. Louis, at its heart, Rendezvous is a collection of garments and photographs that explore this creative partnership between McQueen and his trusted friend, Ann Ray. Before we welcome Ann, Kelly, and Seth to the stage, actually, they've already taken their seat. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones and look around to find your nearest emergency exit while I thank our supporters. The Frist Art Museum gratefully acknowledges our platinum sponsor, HCA Healthcare TriStar Health, our education and community engagement supporter, the Wingate Foundation, our lead sponsor, Blevins Incorporated, the Union Station Nashville Yards and Grand Hyatt Nashville, and our Spanish translation sponsor, the Center for Latin American, Caribbean, and Latinx Studies at Vanderbilt University. And as always, we are grateful for the continuing operating support from the Frist Foundation, Metro Arts, Tennessee Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Now, please join me in welcoming Ann Ray, Kelly Peck, and Seth Feman.
Good evening, everyone. All right, good evening, everyone. It's really nice to have a full house here. Thank you all for making time to be with us as we have this conversation. We are going to try our best to leave some time for questions at the end, although there's a lot of you with a lot of questions, I imagine. So we'll see what we can do. And I hope that we'll have a little bit of time, at least for people to check out the galleries if they haven't done so already. But if you haven't, please come back and spend some time. The galleries are totally transformed and the show is truly remarkable. So there were a lot of directions that we could go in this conversation, and we decided what we would do this time is surprise our visitors with questions rather than prepare a strict dialogue. So they don't know what I'm going to ask them. They don't know what direction I'm going to take things in. And we're going to just get started. So this is an install shot from the third gallery in the exhibition, and it is an image that when we were planning the show didn't stick out to me too much among many of them. It's a very large photograph, but it's not one that I had paid too much attention to until I saw this little detail, which you can kind of make out in that blurry bit in the back, which I took a picture of and sent to on WhatsApp in the middle of the night for her to tell her how excited I was to discover this little detail, which felt like a position that we all find ourselves in during this exhibition. We're sort of voyeurs, but invited to participate in a way in this exhibition. It is, as Anna and I were talking about earlier, it's an invitation. And that word has come up over and over again since we've been installing the show, since Anna and Kelly have arrived. We've been saying the word, sometimes provocation, sometimes invitation, and it's been a really wonderful way to think through the show. The show is in many ways an invitation to see differently, to upturn old myths, separate the person from the persona of Alexander McQueen, or he, Alexander McQueen, as we'll learn more about, to think differently about creativity and how creativity works in individuals and through collaboration, and to think about how fashion itself fits into the larger world of art, and in many ways should be considered just art, because that's what this show makes patently clear. So we're going to touch on all of those things, but I think before we get too far, it would be appropriate to invite my guests here to talk a little bit about themselves and where they're coming from. So Kelly, I'll start with you and ask you to talk about Barrett Barrera Projects and how it became involved in the world of McQueen and Ann Ray, what it does, and where the show came from. I've got a couple of slides to help you along.
Hey, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. So I am the vice president of Barrett Barrera Projects. We were founded in 2014, and we are a multidisciplinary fine arts organization. We have a number of initiatives in the company, but one of those is the exhibition touring arm of our company. And we also hold the largest private collection of Alexander McQueen's work. Began that collection in 2012 under the creative direction of our president, Susan Barrett. And in that time, we have amassed quite a collection which informs the exhibition that you see on view here. And within the collection includes Ann Ray's full McQueen photographic archive, which includes over 32,000 images. 90% of those are unseen. So we're really privileged to work with those objects and those materials. And so internally, we created Lee Alexander McQueen and Ann Ray Rendezvous in partnership with Ann. It was based on friendship amongst our staff internally, friendship amongst our president, Susan, and Ann herself. And now, as the exhibition's been touring, I would say Casper Woldvit and Nick Cherry have been instrumental in realizing it as well. So we're really happy to have them here. And it's a kind of a family affair, this exhibition. So we're really privileged to bring it to you all.
If you're not in the museum world, when somebody says that they have an archive that has 32,000 objects in it, that might not mean a lot, but I'm like gobsmacked to think about how many images that is. My last museum, which was a significant collecting museum, had 30,000 objects in the whole museum. So 32,000 images is a remarkable number of things. And maybe that is a good way on for you to talk about photography. Let's start before Lee comes into the scene, but how did you get started in photography? Where did it come from? What were you doing before Lee and you crossed paths?
So I always loved images, still images and what I call moving images, film. It started at a very early age. I guess I had my first lab when I was 9 or 10. My mother was furious because I was using a complete bathroom to do that with my brother. So it was already a passion. And then I discovered very quickly the power of images and the fact that when you take a photograph, you're responsible for something you are fixing and engraving, and that will resist to time. It was quite obvious early enough. And I met some fantastic artists in all kinds of fields. And I had that feeling before Lee already that I had to engrave. I had the privilege to see something that I could share and transmit. And I had to use photography to do that. Apart from that, of course, I would have some personal projects. But I had, and I still have, a lot of collaborations with artists, meaning I'm in front of something so important that I really have to share it. And when I met Lee McQueen, late 96, so quite a while ago, I have a very funny relationship with time. I always thought I was immortal and I had plenty of time, and suddenly I'm not a young girl anymore and I have to do a lot of things because there is a deadline. And really, when I met Lee, it's still very vivid. I was asked to follow him for the first 2 weeks at Givenchy when he was creating his first couture collection. And we spent basically 14 or 15 hours a day for 2 weeks. And the connection was immediate. If I have a talent, I have to say, I really mean that, it's to recognize talents when I'm in front of it. And so I was amazed since the first moment in the Atelier Givenchy when I saw him taking a roll of fabric and creating what I would call a sculpture around a human body. So it was very human and it was very magic. And I loved him first for his talent and then for his humanity, because he was a lovely man. So the first bond happened there at Givenchy in the Atelier. That's the image that we see now, which we all find very funny in a way. It's a cultural shock. You have a very British bad boy in a way with his gang arriving in this very stylish Atelier, Avenue Georges V in Paris. It's beautiful. And he created already an extraordinary collection like this shirt, which was made of true rose petals captured in silk. So you see how he looks with the sneakers and the Adidas, and you see the delicacy and beauty of what he's creating. And you see the surprise of the petite main of the Atelier. It really was something. And he wouldn't speak French, they wouldn't speak English. So it was really, I was translating sometimes, but it was really the understanding of very talented people in what they were doing. So he would explain with gestures and they would understand. It was beautiful. It was very funny, but it was very beautiful to observe. And then from there, he was sent by Givenchy to Tokyo, where I was living at this time. So we spent in April 97, 1 month in Tokyo. And then I moved to London and I literally arrived from Tokyo to London, dropped my suitcase home and went to the McQueen atelier. And he asked me to be in charge of engraving his story with this kind of famous quote now, which was, the only problem is that I'm broke. So would you accept to give me your photographs and I would give you clothes? And I said, yes, we have a deal. The beauty of it is that it never stopped. We never had any contract, which I still find extraordinary. It was absolute trust, absolute friendship, and it lasted until he left us.
Thanks, Anne. I love this photograph, and the reason why I chose it to start this conversation is not only because it is at the early moment at Givenchy where you're getting to know him, but it encourages us to look at the photographs that are in the show not merely as documents, but as works in and of themselves. And as a photo historian, that's very important to me. These aren't just capturing moments, but they're creations. And what you've posed here is this amazing echoing of people with their hands on the hips, which are all signifying totally different things, but they're all doing the exact same thing. And what I also love about it is that you instantly were able to capture the the multidimensionality, the humanity, the kind of humor, a little bit sort of defiant, but nonetheless warm personality that comes through in all of your images of Lee, as you call him. And that's something that I wanted to dwell on as well, because it's part of what the show does. It's trying to break the mold of the sort of bad boy, enfant terrible, like all of these sort of notions about him, kind of rock star, angry, and it really warms him. And you had access, so I wanted to show kind of a couple of images that play a little bit with this. You're with him for a long time, and you have this access to see him as, like any of us, he embodies so many different dimensions of his personality. But certain times there's real personality that comes through, and I wondered if you could just talk about that bad boy image and your experience of it and how your photographs grappled with that.
Lee was a very complex personality. We can surely say that. He didn't like himself very much, which is really important to say because I heard this many times. Can you imagine living in this land of beauty with my face, which was heartbreaking to me because I found him beautiful. You find beautiful the people you love. It's as simple as that. And so he was very reluctant to be photographed, and I had to be really quick. But he needed portraits. So when I was living in London for 4 years, every time a magazine would ask for his portrait, I was doing it. He would say no unless Anne is doing it. So I photographed it many times. What I love in these two portraits, the one on the left is taken at Givenchy, and I can think of a better image about friendship. He's really comfortable, he's relaxed, we're having fun because he had a British sense of humor, which was delicious. He was very witty, very clever and very witty. And the one on the right that was taken in London, so the left, that's in Paris. The one on the right, it's in London, and he's playing. There is some kind of insolence or irreverence in this portrait. On the contact sheet, which is in the exhibition, you can see there are some very tender images. And at this moment, he's just, playing the enfant terrible, but it's very joyful. I hope you can feel that.
And you get a little bit more here. These are also images that have a subtle punch to them, which is a contradiction, I realize. But I mean what I say. There are stories behind these images, and I wonder if you can just bring them to life for us.
Yes, these two images are special. The one on the left, because it's the most peaceful moment I ever had with him. I was leaving London after 4 years, and we were both kind of sad because we would see each other every week for 4 years. So it was a separation. So he asked me two things: to do an exhibition in his boutique and to do portraits of him at home. So we're in his home. There is absolutely nobody around, no PR person, no counselor, nobody. We're just the two of us and my assistant. And it's what I call real photography. It's I don't know if you're familiar with the technique. It's medium format. It's the square format. So you need to take time to do that kind of portrait. So it was very peaceful. And thinking about this talk, I was just thinking how funny it was to see him opening his wardrobe and saying, "What should I wear?" And I was like, "This is McQueen." And so it shows together very simple outfits, this black sweater and all this. And I love this picture for what is behind the door also. It's a bit dark, but you have a ray of light, so that's very him. And he loved these images. And the brief also was, the briefing he gave me was, "Make me beautiful." Tough job. That's what he said. And the one on the right, that was his first show in Paris at the Conciergerie, which is a historical building where Marie Antoinette was put in jail before being executed. So it's a very heavy place in many ways. And it was a show called Supercalifragilistic, opening with wolves, real wolves screaming. And he liked himself at this time. So this is one of his favorite portraits. This portrait was made in big format and put at the headquarters in McQueen. And it stayed there. That was 2001 or 2. And it stayed there for 9 years until the end.
So these are images that he felt were successful and making him
Yes.
feel beautiful. Feel
Yeah, he
attractive.
loved them. He
Yeah.
loved these 2 images.
Yeah. I love that that sense. There's such an incredible confidence in the work, and it adds so much dimension to think of somebody being uncertain and doubtful and ill at ease with themselves at the same time that they're creating such clear and bold and forthright statements. And that's sort of what got him the reputation to begin with. And Kelly, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how he came into that reputation, perhaps talking about some of the garments that we have here, some of that pre-Givenchy work that helped start his career in many ways.
Sure. And, for those who may be familiar with fashion in the 90s, and certainly Ann was there and lived it, so could probably speak to this, even better than I. But, there was the moment of the supermodel, the celebrity fashion designer. 90s minimalism was very much in vogue. And here you have Lee McQueen in the early 90s. He studied on Savile Row, so he learned the art of tailoring. And he also went to Central St. Martin's, which is a very esteemed fashion school in London. And he had very sharp silhouettes, and he had somewhat darker themes, but he was very much a storyteller, and those stories informed his collections in ways that other designers of the time weren't really creating those narratives. Certainly some of the pieces you see here, the centerpiece and then the tartan skirt are from a collection titled Highland Rape, and it was widely misunderstood. Many people thought that it was misogynistic against women. The models sort of swaggered down the runway as if they had been hurt, but it was referencing war and genocide. It was referencing what McQueen felt were the abuses by the English against the Scottish. So he was really mining autobiography. He was looking to deeper narratives. When I get asked about McQueen, sometimes it's so all-encompassing because he did so much research that it can be hard to know all of his references because he was such a student of the world. But that's my take on it. Ann, I don't know if you have anything to add about how he came across as that early reputation, but it seemed that his early collections were a bit misunderstood and a bit harsher than his peers.
I remember even the first collections at Givenchy were very badly received, and that I was very sad about that. It was very unfair. It was really, I remember reading the articles in the French press. They were terrible about his first collection. And also what I experienced is that during his entire life, he was just surrounded by women. That was very striking because usually in fashion, you have men and women working, and around Lee, it was only women. It was 2 women doing the set designs. It was Sarah Burton working with him. It was his mother and his sisters being on the show. I was in charge of photography. Amy Whitton was at the press. So you had Lee and all these women, and he loved women so much. And when you look at his garments, even here, when you see the collar, which is black with the gold, you have lots of, it's like these shoulders I'm wearing. I mean, I can go anywhere with this. I'm not afraid of anybody or anything when I wear McQueen. It's a protection. and you feel very strong and protected as a woman when you wear McQueen. So it was really a misunderstanding, as you said. Yeah.
We dance back and forth across calling his work fashion and art, and the displays of the work as a presentation of a line and performance art. We sort of jump around in that. And I want to actually, I think I'm going to skip one and then come back here. I wanted to show this video clip. Hopefully it'll play without sound because it's not the right sound. So maybe you can tell us what we've just seen. I think that would be helpful, a little context.
So you've just seen the finale of one of McQueen's most acclaimed collections titled Number 13. And that is model Shalom Harlow, who's a former dancer, enacting what was, as Anne described, a moment of mutual trust, and two robotic arms that were used to spray cars, painting her beautiful white dress. And Anne, if you can talk about that experience of witnessing that.
Yes, I'm very moved to watch the movie. Actually, I haven't seen it for a while, and it's funny. I was talking about time and my relationship to time, which is very strange, and which is even more fascinating is how our brain works and memories, and how all these moments are so vivid. I mean, that was in 98. Yeah, it was in September 98. So that's 26 years ago. Oh my God. And it's like yesterday. So again, if I have a talent, it's maybe to feel this with my soul and to know at this very moment that it's exceptional and I need to keep track of that in the best possible way. Everybody was very, very moved. Everybody was aware in the close circle around me that it was truly a very special moment. We were all crying. That's the only time I saw Lee crying. So was I and everybody in the team, because it was so powerful, so evocative artistically, and you can still read it in many ways. I still see two animals waking up and attacking this woman. I took quickly the decision to photograph in black and white, so I know I would miss the yellow, but black was enough. The stain was powerful enough to be in black and white. And what I love in this image, it's how she is almost invincible. and she's been attacked, and she's full of pride, and she's sublime. So that was difficult to do that picture because it was a bit frantic after that moment.
It's so, I encourage all of you to go online and watch these performance art pieces and experience them. Be warned that oftentimes the soundtrack that's playing is not the accurate soundtrack of the time, but you get a real sense of the creativity of the entire event. And I'm interested in, I'll skip through this again, but I'm interested in the transposition of these live performed artworks and capturing them in still images. And I thought this might be a way to begin talking about that. So either one of you could walk us through what this show was, and then I'd love to hear from you about how this shoot came about and what's going on here.
Yes, you're very right, Seth, to talk about performances. I've been talking a lot about Lee McQueen in the past years, and we all have to pick our battles. So I had a few battles about him. One was to give Lee his real name, Lee, because Alexander McQueen is a brand and Lee McQueen is a man and was my friend. And another battle was to say that every show was not a show, but a performance, an artistic performance. He said it himself very clearly. He said, I have a vision and I have to express lots of things inspired by the world, what I see in the street, what I feel, my personal history, and fashion is just the medium. So there's nothing wrong with fashion, but it was really an instrument for him to build a performance, which would be given only one time. It's not like a concert or a play that will be played a few weeks. It was just one time for 15 minutes, and it made it even more special. It makes me laugh when people talk about runways or catwalks, because there was never any catwalks, basically. So about this one, how should I explain this? You had the stage like this, and you had 20 meters above the floor. You had a tunnel made of metal. That's what you see on the images. And you had a wind machine, so the model would walk like this for you, and you would see the movement in the garments. There were two garments for this. So like for any performance, Lee would make rehearsals. So that's in the afternoon, was a show where always in the evening. And I went up in this corridor of metal, and the wind machine was in front of me. There was somebody from the team laughing. I was saying this morning, saying, Anne, you're never gonna make it, because I was shaking with the wind, but I wanted to take these pictures because it was spectacular. And I just had my small M6 Leica to do that. And I love these images because it's really a dream to me. It's a fantasy or phantasmagoric world. And on the third image, Lee was at the end of the tunnel. What a metaphor! And you can see you can see his silhouette. So you have the silhouette of the woman, and you have his silhouette. You will see in the exhibition adjusting something on the garment, because he was a perfectionist, of course.
I didn't think of this when we were planning the exhibition and when we were doing the design, the layout, and working with Barrett Barrera Projects to think about where things should go and paint colors and all those things. But it being very clear once the show is installed that it too is a work of performance, that we are inviting people like those voyeurs at the first image that I showed to not only look, but also move through a kind of trajectory. And Kelly, I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about the exhibition itself. I've just got these two stills because I don't want to give too much away for those of you who have not yet been in. But these are two stills from our display. And if you can talk as the lead curator of the project to tell us about kind of how the organization is set up, why some of the choices were made. It is it is certainly in my time here, which is brief, but it is the most theatrical performance display that we put on. And it really, I was commenting earlier, we had a media preview earlier today. Some of you were there. And usually for media previews, we have reporters who are like jotting down the facts. They need to write copy quickly and get the notes right and get the details right. But we had media folks walking through and sort of stunned and, catching a tear in their eye as they were walking through. It is a moving experience. So that is both congratulations and also an invitation for you to share a little bit about what that planning looked like.
Sure. And it's, something we've thought very carefully about because this is a story that On has entrusted Barrett Barrera Projects to tell. We take that responsibility incredibly seriously. This is the first exhibition of Alexander McQueen's work that is arranged mostly chronologically. And that is to sort of unturn some myths that were perpetuated by larger thematic labels that he bore during his life and thereafter. The exhibition is arranged into chapters, both the photography chapters that On herself selected and curated to denote their friendship and their life and work together. She shot over 43 collections over 13 years. And then also chapters in McQueen's work. So it's arranged into early, mid, late, and posthumous chapters. And that is with the intention to put the objects forward. We want the craftsmanship and the artistry of the works to really speak for themselves. And then the photography is to add that sense of movement, that sense of what it was really like. The clothes were meant to be worn. And as On has shared, Lee really enjoyed seeing his clothes being worn. So his creations come to life. And I think the photography helps achieve that. But when we were arranging the exhibition, it was very much sort of an unveiling and working with our exhibition designer from Barrett Barrera Projects, Nick Cherry. He's really savvy at helping us create these reveals. And so that's very much a part of the exhibition design and the exhibition experiences. We don't give you too much too soon because we want you to have an emotional experience and feel the emotional content of the friendship and the personhood of Lee.
It is really remarkable. We pride ourselves at museums of making it look like things are just so. It's just the way it is. We want it to look very natural, and yet it takes a lot of work and thought into making it an emotional journey, like any performance art would have, or a performance. You'll notice that the rooms very subtly change their tone as you walk through, and they change their scale as they walk through. And these just have the slightest effect of changing your perception as you go. There are these also moments, I'll show you this next pair of images too, where the photographs can echo one another and talk to one another. We were all kind of amazed when we walked through and saw this. On and I were looking at this and just going back and forth about the cigarette and the white scratch in the photograph, the curve of the hand one way, the curve of the hand in the other way. There are these very beautiful moments that are set up to give you a moment to think and reflect, and some space as you go through the exhibition. The thing that you just said on fashion is just a medium, something I appreciate, because you were thinking about somebody who has a vision and they're using materials. And I'm reminded of the tattoo that Lee had as well. I want to get it right, so I better read it. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, right? It was Shakespeare quote. And I think a lot about how photography plays that role as well. And I just wanted to run through a couple of photographs of yours, share as much or as little as you like. But I think you bring these images to life. And what strikes me, I'll start with at least, is that the photographs themselves are very, very quiet. And when I imagine the world of McQueen and the performances, I think of noise, I think of activity, I think of this kind of chaos and loudness. And you have this ability to literally transpose them into these quiet and still moments most of the time. And I picked a couple, and I'll just show them and share a little bit if you don't mind. Yes.
Just wanted to say something about these two images, which was absolutely extraordinary when I was working with Lee, is when we were going through the contact sheets together. And he was so clever. He could like images like the one on the left where you didn't see anything of the clothes. And there are others, I'm thinking of a portrait, and the young woman was just wearing her t-shirt. She had the hair done and she looks up. It's called Sacred Face. And she's really very spiritual. And I love this image, and Lee loved it. And I was asking him, why do you love it? We see nothing of your work. And he said, because you capture the spirit of the collection. And that matters to me. So he loved this hand too, because it was in line with the collection that was presented, and it was in line with the British atmosphere in a warehouse somewhere in the southeast London. It was fierce and wild. And so it was a gift for me to work with somebody who would understand what I was doing, actually.
Would you? I loved learning the story about this image as well. So if you care to talk about it, I know it's personally significant to you. They all, of course, they all are.
Yes, that's when I say I love this picture. And I do love it because Lee has been inspired by anything. It could be nature, it could be the graphic design of a shell, it could be a movie he took, it could be a historical reference. He was so curious. He had this appetite, which is also a sign of intelligence for me, the curiosity. And his curiosity was endless. So this collection was a prêt-à-porter collection for Givenchy, inspired by the movie Blade Runner. So you recognize the hair, the movie by Ridley Scott. And I really needed to find in my images a response to his work and his inspiration. So I wanted the images to look as cinematographic as possible. And for me, it's an invitation to travel when I look at this photograph, and I hope it works on you, like something is happening and you can imagine different versions of the story. But to me, it's not at all a fashion image. It's about storytelling. I love to tell stories, and Lee was a storyteller, as you were saying, Kelly. So it's in line with his work. Should I go on?
Please do.
Les oiseaux, the birds. The birds were very important for Lee, and they are for me too. Birds, angels, all these things. This show, we are in 2001, I guess. It's called Voss. It was I have to talk about the set of this show because it's so typical of Lee. The stage was a square room with mirrors, des miroirs sans teint, when you can look inside, but people mirrors. Can't look at you. How do you go?
Mirrors.
Yeah. So, and you had the audience sitting on the four sides of the square, and Lee made them wait so long. We were so late, and he was laughing behind because the fashion people had to look at themselves for 1 hour. And that's really so him. I mean, we could have started after 30 or 35 minutes, but he was like, no, let them wait. And so the woman, the models were walking inside and would put their hands like this at the end of the mirror. It was spectacular. And you had an installation inspired by a photograph by Joel Peter Whitkins with a naked person with a mask. I mean, it was impressive, and moth flying and all the four walls falling down and scratches. It was really
And
something.
those walls would fall down and burst, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I encourage you to watch the video of this VOSS, VOSS show, because it was something about the birds. Lee wanted to have, like in Hitchcock, when the birds grab the hair. But there are some photographs that you know, Kelly, showing Lee sitting on the floor like a student from St. Martin's and building the structure of the three birds and fixing. And you see him with the glue, actually, fixing the birds himself. So it was a chaos backstage, but it was a work chaos. You had people finishing dresses and all that. I've been working a little with John Galliano. It was a party. It was music. It was something else. At McQueen, it was work. Everybody was focused. And so Lee was building this structure and then explaining to Jade Parfit, who is still a friend, how to behave and how to move when she was going to work with the birds.
I love this one. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in the interest of time. There's so many stories about each of these, but Kelly, I wanted to invite you to speak a little bit about the stories that are in the garments, because it's something that if you haven't seen the performances, or if you have only seen the garments as ready to wear, or as something to wear as fashion, you might not understand them as part of a narrative. So I put these up as options, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the storytelling of the garments themselves.
Sure. Well, certainly he was a master storyteller, and well credited for marrying technical ability with artistry. I particularly love the piece on the left, which is sort of these copper flames. His mother, Joyce, whom he was very close with, as On said, he was very close with numerous women in his life, including his mother. She was an avid genealogist and researched their family background quite a bit and found that one of their distant ancestors were persecuted in the Salem witch trials. And so he developed a collection around that idea in memory of Elizabeth Howe, from autumn winter 2007. And this is one of the standout pieces from the collection. Very much sort of a statement against zealotry, and, you know, quite beautiful, but also, again, filled with a lot of emotional content and historical silhouette. And then I will touch on the detail of the coat in the center. So as On described earlier, Lee's friend, muse, and as she would say, soulmate, Annabelle Nielsen, and Lee shared a poem together, Edgar Allan Poe's Annabelle Lee. And as a testament to their friendship, he had this fabric made that had the embroidery of the words of the poem made. And it was then produced into a coat. Annabelle herself was gifted a bolt of that fabric, and On photographed her with that fabric. And as Annabelle said, it was one of her most prized possessions, despite living a very privileged life with many possessions.
Thank you.
And just to be factual, she read the poem at Lee's funeral. So this poem was really very important for both of them. It's a beautiful poem. I encourage you to read it, In a Kingdom by the Sea. It's beautiful. It's very Lee, because he was, I just want to add this, he was full of poetry. That's not what you read, but he was full of fantasy and creativity and full of poetry and romance too.
I'm gonna shorten this a little bit because we're gonna run out of time, and I'd love to get a couple of questions. But I did want to have an opportunity for you to talk about your work more expansively. You and Lee shared a life together and a creative camaraderie, collaboration in many ways. But when we were walking through together, I mentioned to you that there were elements of your sort of independent work and work that you've done since Lee has passed that are already showing up in these bodies of work. A couple of us had a very, very wonderful opportunity to visit you at your studio, and you were very nice by regaling us with these wonderful stories of what things were like during the performances and wonderful moments with Lee. But you did share with us a little bit of your own work. You shared with me a book of your work, and I think we would all be benefited by hearing a little bit more about your practice and how it shows up here. And maybe you could talk about some of your current projects as well.
Yes, I can do that. It's both simple and difficult to express, but I think that in many of my works, mainly photography, but also I do some collage and abstract paintings and all sorts of things. I'm really trying to tell the unspeakable, meaning I love the fleeting moments, I love the accidents, I love the les moments interstitial moments, something very fragile, very human, and very beautiful. For instance, when I look at the rose, as we were saying together, it's something, it's like a secret, it's a bit hidden, and suddenly you have the beauty that you're discovering, or you have the garment on the hangers, and it's messy, but it's like a bird stopped on a branch, and the shadow, of course, is important. So I have this kind of sensitivity for what I would call my useless images, which are my favorites actually, because they are close to some kind of truth. I think life is too short not to be true to yourself. And that's something that Lee taught me, that you have to stand by your work. So whatever you do, don't do it for other people. Then you will have the step of sharing and transmitting. But when I do something, I put my soul in it, in everything I do. Actually.
Thank you, Anne. I'll hold us here on this pair of images while we go to questions. This is how the show begins and how the show ends. There's a wonderful and very blurry, I'm sorry, collage work on the left, which is the first thing that you see. And there is a much easier to read image on the right of a contact sheet. There are several contact sheets. And what I love about this is that you see really several creative minds at work at different stages in compiling this contact sheet. There's a conversation when the images are made between An and Lee about sitting, about having the picture made. And then there's another conversation that's had about selecting the image and squaring the one that each one of them thought was the right one, the one to go forward. And then an editing process where you see the stickers coming in and adding another layer of selection. For those of us who have worked in that industry, it's kind of painful to see this because it's stress. But there's also these moments of real beauty where minds come together and it is so clear what the right image is. And when you go through, I really encourage you to spend some time with these final images in the exhibition where you can really see a dialogue, an ongoing rendezvous, as it were, between different creative minds. With that, did you want to say something? I saw you going for the switch.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the collage. I mean, the contact sheets you will see by yourself. It speaks volumes, actually. And it was a wonderful process to select the images with Lee McQueen. But on the collage, I really like it because it's like life. Life is chaos. I mean, it's like if you look at atoms and everything, if it's si c'est ordonné, comment je dis ça? If everything is in order, it's dead. Chaos is life. I'm sure of that. So I like the chaos of this collage because there is an invitation for Lee's birthday. There is Suzanne Barrett and myself hugging. It's life at large. And it's how this project was created with Barrett Barrera Projects too. It's all the encounters, the first article in Le Monde when I was in the atelier for the first collection. So it's really, there is everything. The only photograph I have with Lee made with a disposable camera, believe it or not. So it's very lifeful. It's about life, and I love it.
We really don't have time for questions, but we're going to make time. We're going to make time for questions. And we've got a couple people with mics who can come around. Please do use them so we can all hear what you're asking.
Thank you. Kelly, or Ann, on either one. Do you feel that in the current brand, they have honored Lee's vision?
I think that's such a good question and very topical for the moment. My personal perspective, while I would not consider myself necessarily a McQueen historian, what I would say is what I think was so strong about Lee's work was this narrative component, deep research, deep storytelling, lots of cultural references. Do I feel that the recent runway presentation brought together all of that kind of legacy in the same way? Not for me, but I think Alexander McQueen has become a very corporate brand, and they're searching for how do you survive as a corporate brand and honor legacy and artistry? John Matheson is a McQueen historian. He runs an Instagram called McQueen Vault, and he wrote a fantastic review that is very balanced and perceptive. And so I would encourage anybody to also read his point of view. Because I think there are people who knew Lee McQueen and they hold that legacy incredibly tight. So I don't also know that anybody could have come in from outside the house and fulfilled that role exactly as we had all hoped. And that's my perspective. I don't know what you think, hon.
Seriously, it's a difficult question because Sarah Burton, who took the job, is a very close friend and one of the most honest and wonderful person I know on this planet. And Sarah, I think, made the perfect choice, which was to say, I'm not a storyteller. I'm not an artist as Lee was. So I have the DNA of the house in me and I'm going to do the best I can, but I'm not going to do shows, storytellings and all that because that was Lee and Lee only. So it was a very honest, she took the job, but with a very honest position. And I think she's done an amazing work, which was absolutely in line with the legacy of Lee. She knew him by heart. They've been working so much together. And it's funny because she stayed 13 years, actually. She left after 13 years. Now, fashion today, I mean, when we were looking at the show with Shalom, it was another era. And I'm really sorry to say that, but it's a big business, fashion now. And I don't think there is so much room for really total freedom and creativity. I would like to add a detail which is very significant about business versus art and creativity. At the beginning, the McQueen company was not making so much money. So basically, Lee had the same question for each show. Do you want to do an advertising campaign or do you want to do your crazy thing? And so he would always say, I'm going to do what I have in mind. I'm going to materialize my vision, which is insane, meaning if you think about it, there was no advertising at all for McQueen during all these years. There was only the 15 minutes performance. And I don't think this should be possible today. So I don't like to say it was better before, but it was really another era. And it's not really comparable. But anyway, I think it's not the same today.
Yes.
This question is for you. I was privileged enough to be on the opening tour this morning. It was so moving. If you haven't had a chance to walk through, I very much encourage that. But with the theme being friendship, I was curious if you'd be open to sharing when was the moment that you knew that you and Lee were going to be friends?
Very easy, the first week at Givenchy, because we were very, as I said this morning, he was very wild, meaning very shy, and I was very shy. I learned to talk since then, but we were not talking very much, but we were observing each other like real shy people do, like animals, you know, like almost smelling each other. Really, it was, but not talking. and spending, as I said, 14, 15 hours per day together. So there was this mutual observation, and very quickly Lee came to me to say, I've been observing you. And I said, so did I. And we talked, and it was, yeah, it was very spontaneous, and it was very obvious, actually. But yeah, this is not funny, actually. I think, God knows that I've been thinking a lot about this, but I think because I was in pure joy working with Lee, I was ecstatic counting the days before the new show, and it was very spontaneous. To such a point, because he was very grounded, he never got a big head, so the relationship never changed. I was coming and I was doing my work, we were looking at the contact sheet, so I honestly didn't realize how famous he was when he died, because it hasn't changed for me over 13 years. And it was the same thing, seeing each other, hugging. He was showing me the collection, which was one of my favorite moments in the afternoons. Look at this, I've done that, do you like this? And it never changed. So when he died, I had a million thoughts. And I realized that a man of his brilliance and as clever as he was, it was impossible that I've been doing this job for 13 years if he didn't have an intention. So I think he knew much before me that I was in charge of his legacy. He said it in the last conversation we had in 2009. It's, you have my life in pictures, and I wanted it that way. So I think the intention was clear in his mind years before. Not in my mind. I was just a bit dreaming.
I think we could do one more.
Thank you for being here. This question is for you as well. On the gallery, there's this cyanotype, and I was intrigued by, the description on it. I was a little, especially since everything's like, black and white here and there, a little, bold. And then seeing the cyanotype, and then seeing that McQueen had, according to the description, some blue. I don't remember if it's like essence or aura. Could you explain a little bit significance of this, so why you chose this medium and why the blue essence? Yeah.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
It's asking about the cyanotype that you see in the show,
cyanotype.
blue photograph.
So very quickly. At the time when I met Lee, so the late 90s, I was very much into what is called in photography the pictorialist processes. To make it short, at the 19th century, photography was not acknowledged as an art. So lots of people developed techniques, very pictorialist. There were cyanotypes, which are blue. There were aquatint or gum bichromates. There were platinum prints, all sorts of things to make it look more artistic in a way. And I was very much experimenting all this. I still had my darkroom. And so the timing is that I'm in these processes used for academic subjects like nature, like nudes, and I'm meeting Lee McQueen. And I thought it would be so funny to use these very traditional old techniques for this enfant terrible, for this young British boy. So it was really a click between the two. And the blue cyanotype, which is, I have to say this story because it's so funny and typical of Lee. Lee loved these blue cyanotypes. So he loved one image and he said, I would like you to do your blueprints, and you can do different versions, more or less contrasty and softer and more powerful. And he said, how many versions can you do? And I said, as much as I want. He said, okay, do something. So I came back with 23 different versions of the cyanotypes. And I was putting them on the floor and we were both laughing. And he was he liked it, and I liked to make him happy. So there's one in the exhibition, but it was the kind of challenge that Lee McQueen could create to all the people working with him. And I'm grateful for a million reasons of the time I spent with him, but especially for this very generous quality. He was uplifting all of us. So it was very much about joy, enjoyment, brightness, and challenge. And it was very human and very generous experience overall.
On Kelly, guests, thank you very, very much.